Okay, this is a bunch of instructional stuff that's gonna help all of you guys out, and, it's a sort of a, running through, you're gonna run through a bunch of stuff, but one of the things here, what you gotta do is recognize the fact that, you can get bogged down in, like, let's, for example, like on these right here, when I was working at the dealership, I would see a lots of Tauruses in this particular vintage here that the fuel pumps would be bad. Now, when they first started making putting electric fuel pumps widely and, high pressure electric fuel pumps in cars, they didn't put lubricants in the gasoline to lubricate the pump, and so the pumps would fail because they'd wear out. Then they started putting, back in the day, if you put your hands in the gas and you waved it off, it would, your hand would get really dry. But now if you put your hand in gas and wave it around, you might notice it's all slippery. And so they did that because the pumps were, were pumping the gas through, and the pump is in the bottom of that little cylindrical thing you got, and it pumps the gas. Well, this right here, this pump right here, the pump is in the bottom of that, and it pumps the gas right past all of the spinning electric motor and over the brushes and everything. It just, the whole pump is wet on the inside. But the part down in the bottom, the heart of the pump is only a little tiny thing, and it's a little positive displacement pump. Anyway, the long and the short of it is they were wearing out. And so I was having to replace a lot of pumps because they would wear out. Not because they were electrically bad, but because they'd be worn out. They'd be making noise, they'd be making air, they'd cavitate, you'd have all kinds of issues with that. So I threw a fuel pump at this one. Basically and also checked, and a lot of times electrically they'd be bad, and I checked this one here. Electrically, it didn't have any ground coming back through it. And so I threw a pump at it. You gotta make sure the inertia switch is not tripped, throw a pump in there, and I would jack it up, put a jack stand on it, and lower the tank, and do it on the ground. I could do it real fast. It didn't take very long. This particular one smacked me around. And what happened was, after I put the pump in there, it still wouldn't start, and I still had it ground. But see this ground right here? I'll show you where that ground is on the car. I backed up. I went the wrong way. Hold on. I want to go here. There is that's crazy because of the pictures that I had in that folder was supposed to load there. See that picture right there? The ground was right here. See that ground? In other words, it come off the battery, and it was a little 2-wire ground that went right there. And whenever you saw it, that's where it was. Okay, so that was a crazy thing, and it was chalked up. Whenever I unplugged it, it was all chalky and everything. It was a bad ground. But the fuel pump ground was being supplied through that one. It didn't, go over there. Anyway, felt really bad about that. Well, this Navigator driver had navigated with this bucking and jerking check engine light on. Been driving it for a while like that. You ever drive one that was giving it trouble? Let's keep on driving it and try to work around it. I heard Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers, talking one time about this woman that had kept some water with her because in her Volvo or whatever she was driving, sometimes when it wouldn't start, she'd have to pour water in the ignition key and then it would start. So she kept some water in there with her, and she'd always pour water in there when it would start. But it's really amazing what people will do to work around something like that. And also, have you ever noticed that the only guy that can really start the lawnmower good, if it's an old lawnmower, is the guy that uses it to cut his grass every time? He knows just what to do, just how to set the choke, just how to pull it. You pull it once, it'll die. You set this, you pull it again, it fires up. When somebody else tries to start it, they'll just pull it, their tongue hangs out like a tie. You know what I mean? All right, so anyway, this person here is driving around on this thing. It's actually a welding instructor's son. We felt it jump. We got some cam sensor codes and scope patterns, and this is what our trace looked like. We got the cam sensor. This is the crank sensor. And these are the two cam sensors. You got a cam sensor on each head, right? And they're supposed to look like this. See how these are perfectly lined up down there? And these right here weren't lined up. They were basically out of line with each other. That tells you got timing chain issues, which is not so terribly uncommon on these engines. And where we went with that was the picoscope pattern of two cam sensor to crank sensor. The number one bank's camshaft. The number one bank's the one on the passenger side on a Ford. Remember, on a Chevrolet, the number one cylinder is on the driver's side front, and that's bank 1. And on a Ford, the passenger side front is number 1, and that's the bank 1. So if you're looking at oxygen sensors, HO2S11 on a Chevy is on which side? based on what I just told you, driver's side. HO2S11 on the passenger side on the Ford. So it's bank one and oxygen sensor one's always gonna be on the same side, but they're gonna be on opposite sides on the Chevy versus the Ford. Because the farther it's cylinder forward on the crankshaft is what cylinder number one. And it just so happens that one goes up this way on the Chevy and that way on the Ford. Also on the Ford it counts 1, 2, 3, 4 and then 5, 6, 7, 8. And on the Chevy it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So keep that in mind too. Alright, we bumped it over to on the three-prong side of the three-prong side, and I'll show you that in a minute. Was lined up with the hole and looked to see if this little L symbol on that gear was out of line, if it was out of phase. You know, it wasn't a phaser that was doing it, but there was a problem. All right, now if you're not replacing the timing chain, but you are replacing the phasers, you're going to get this little wedge. Back in the day when I worked at the Mazda dealership, we had a piece of wood that we made that we stick down in there. And what you're going to do is you're going to ram it down in there and you're going to keep the timing chain tensioner from ratcheting its way out, because if that happens, you got to pull the whole front off the motor. But you can replace those phasers without actually having to pull everything else off. And this is, you know, the system here's got somebody got paint on there. But you got 2 on that side, 3 on that side. These actually go wheeling past that cam sensor and give you that pattern we were showing you earlier. All right, and see how you do that? You're gonna, there's your tensioner right there, and that tensioner is pushing against this slide. And when you shove that thing down in there and it wedges in between that this is stiff, chain can't move. This is stiff right here, being pushing on the chain. You push that down so that that keeps it where it's supposed to be, and you can actually change out that tensioner without having to worry about fooling with all this stuff down here, as long as there's no problem down here. But the one that the HHR you guys are putting the motor in, it's got those little sliders down in there, and what happened on that one was all that came apart and it started flopping around. It got out of time. It hit valves, you know, hit pistons, and it busted roller rockers, and that's why y'all are having to change the engine out in that one. And so, but it's got those same kind of sliders in here, and they kind of like to come apart. All right. So with the valve covers and the timing cover off, we discovered the real problem, which is more common than phaser. These things right here like to come apart. These slides at the chains right are plastic, you know. And the straight fixed slide on the upper stretch of the number. You might notice that the chain, if you look at this chain right here with its tensioner and all, it's built and configured just like the other chain, but it's not a mirror image like you'd expect. It looked like you took it and rolled it over. See, the flat side's on the top, on this side it's on the, like that. So this one over here and that one over there. This one here had come apart. Can you see that? This part right here got gone. We found it in pieces laying down in there, and that's why this chain wasn't being kept tight. It was just sort of, you know, moving around and everything. And so we wound up, as a matter of fact, that guy that just come out here to talk to me, like he's been in here a few days, he's the one that did this job.
Adam?
Yeah, Adam, and he actually did it. Not Adam Snap, the other Adam. You know. And anyway, so this one here, see, you got that slider, this slider. Here's your, when you buy this kit, you get all of these. You get that, you know, this tensioner slider, then you get the fixed slider on both sides and all that. You got to put all that stuff in there, and then you know, make sure it's all in time, and the teeth are painted, and the, you know, and it's gonna, you got paint, you know, paint colored teeth on here. So it's been a 14-hour flag for a line guy. All right, 4 more vehicles rolled in while the Navigator was under repair. Let me back up again. I'm messed up here. The town car got a stent misfire. 2002 Taurus, the owner said had an underloaded bite at 45 miles an hour. And the 2004 Tahoe that intermittently wouldn't start. And then he'd wait a while, 30 minutes or something, it might start, it might not. When it started, it was okay for a while. 2001 F-150 with electrical gremlin. Instrument clusters remain illuminated with the key off, fluttering odometer segments, dead battery after sitting overnight, all kinds of crap going on with that one there. Now the town car, this right here is where the heater hose comes out of that manifold in the back, and sometimes it leaks. And you see where that water been going in there, it goes right into that spark plug well in number 4. That's what she had that. So it's loaded with coolant that led us to look at the heater hose fitting around above it. You can't change this fitting out. It's actually made into the manifold. Now if you were going to be a real knothead, you might be able to pull that thing out of there and tap it with half-inch pipe thread or something to put something in there, you know, but we put a manifold on that one. And it's a pressed-in thing. We got an intake manifold, some plugs, and a coil. Took care of that. Now the Taurus wasn't so cut and dried. They said whenever I was talking to a customer, and they don't always give you all the information you need, 45-mile-an-hour irregular misfire, you know, where it was biting, you know, boop, boop, boop. Anytime you feel that sharp bite, boop, 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 you know, where it's coming and going like that, runs good and it bites, that's an ignition misfire. It'll be a plug, it'll be a coil, it'll be a leaking spark or something like that. Well, I fired it up driving to service bay the next day. It was surging really bad, just barely would run, and it wouldn't even hardly pull off in any gear when it was cold, so why didn't he mention that? I mean, to me, that was a worse problem than that misfire bite, right? What do you need to go for a test drive? This had to be straightened out first. All right, so I've got some scan tool pin sifting. I didn't really help very much, but I unplugged the mass airflow sensor and it ran a whole lot better. Now, a lot of times when you unplug the mass airflow sensor, see, it defaults and it starts getting information from the TP sensor. And, you know, some of them actually got a map sensor on them too, but it'll actually start pulling data from other places and it'll run you know, written algorithms. And so it just leaves the map out of the loop and starts using other things so it'll get you home. And if you ever see one that you're driving, if you get about to a certain place in the throttle and it just won't go any faster, there's nothing wrong at all with getting out there. Of course, you got to, you know, gather your data and pull codes and stuff. If you have an in-range failure of a mass airflow sensor, it won't throw you a code every time. So if you unplug the mass airflow sensor and it runs like a race car, I've seen mass airflow sensors that could only read about half of what they're supposed to read. They get up to about 2.5 volts if you're reading voltage or whatever, and they just stop going up. And then the engine says, well, this is all the air we got. No matter where the throttle is, this is all I'm going to give it. So anyway, you actually replace the mass airflow. Now on this kind right here, mass airflow sensor, it's got a hot wire and a cold wire. The cold wire is basically its basis for some comparison. Because what it wants to do is it wants to keep the hot wire 300 degrees Celsius hotter than the cold wire, and it measures how much amps it takes to do that. If they get this crud on them, see that crud on those wires? That's basically a little tiny piece of nylon or something, I don't know what it's made out of. And it's got platinum wire wrapped around it on both of these. And if somebody's been running an air filter, it's got holes in it, it's going to let a bunch of crud go through there and it's going to coat that little old hot and cold wire. And I've actually washed the mass airflow sensor off with some of that mass airflow sensor cleaner and put it back down there and it would go. Me and Donnie were working together. When Donnie would run into something like this, what he would always do is he'd always want to look and check it. And like for example, if he got a throttle position sensor code, you know, if I got a throttle position sensor code, I go up on a voltmeter, I'd go up, if I saw it drop out, and I said, yep, bad TP sensor, I'd throw one on there and drive it, and everything's fine, I put it outside. Well, he wasn't like me. He had to have more input before he, you know, I tend to make a snap judgment sometimes misfire like that, but usually you get done quicker. And if you can, I found really good evidence about what you think. So Donnie, what he would do is that if he saw it fall out, that wasn't good enough. He'd jiggle the wires, he'd mess with it, he'd work with it again. He'd spend another 30 minutes after I've already put a sensor on it. But he wanted to make doggone sure. You see, nothing wrong with that. That's what you think. All right, cleaning the mass airflow sensor might be in order, but we're going to put a mass airflow from the reman. By the way, they're wanting the core back on those now because they rebuilt them. All right, the mass airflow was dirty because of the used up air filter. It wasn't clogged, but it had been compromised. It had holes in it. Also, if it's one, if you ever went to check the air filter and found that rubber seal around the outside, it was kind of crummy and cheap, and it would fall in there and let air go past the filter. You know, it's like a sorry filter. You know what I'm talking about? If you see one of those, it needs to be replaced, even if it ain't dirty, because it's let dirt in there. Fuel filter was something else we decided to check, which is just wise. A lot of people don't think nothing about a fuel filter, and so a lot of times when you got one that's in there, it's got a good idea to pull a fuel filter out. I get one of these. You know the plastic drink that you get from your Hardee's that you drank up and it's an empty bottle? I like it because it's the white jug. So I blow backwards through that filter, and whatever comes out of it, you know, you can show your customer, look at all this crud within your fuel filter, you know. Also, that fuel filter is supposed to blow through it like a drinking straw. And if you're blowing backwards through it, you're going, and you can't hardly get no air through it, there you go. So anyway, you'd be surprised how many times you'll find a stopped up fuel filter on one. Stopped up fuel filter won't typically make it hard to start. You know, it typically won't make it misfire like a, you know, spark plug bite, but it'll make it lose power when you're trying to pass a car or go up a hill. That's what you're looking for on that. All right, so the 2000 Taurus, we hooked up the IDS, and we wound up getting this right here. This was what the IDS power balance screen looks like, and it was dropping out on that one right there. And I found original concern. He had cracked the number one spark plug. Of course, number one was over here on that one. I just gave you a representative screen. He cracked the number one spark plug, we replaced that, and the bike was gone. Got rid of his bike, got rid of his bad running problem, ran like a sewing machine went left. Now this one here was another new frontier. More interested in the Taurus, a little trickier. And I had never, they bring it in, you try to duplicate the concern. One of the things you're supposed to do is verify the concern, spin it, you know, and boom, fire up every time. It'd fire up every time. And so we changed the oil, replaced the air and fuel filter, because that hadn't been done in a long time. The fuel filter was so old, it was rattling when we shook it. You shake the fuel filter, you get it rattling, you know, that thing started to get little in there, and it probably ain't filtered anything. Nick, what you walking around out there for?
I was looking for y'all.
Gone it all.
Then
All right.
right.
You're 3 days late. All right. Now, this Tahoe failed to start. When I was talking to the lady on the phone, somebody tried to start it, and it would go spin. Been starting just fine up until now. Well, pulled one of the plugs out, and they were wet. Think about this, it's been starting just fine, now all of a sudden it's got wet plug. Could be a result of fuel calculations due to an erroneous fuel composition sensor signal. What's a fuel composition sensor? The fuel composition sensor is, let me see that thing right there. That thing I got my laser pointed at, right there. That is the fuel composition sensor that came off of that vehicle. Do you know how much a fuel composition sensor for a 2004 Tahoe costs, this thing here? It's basically telling the engine controller how much of the fuel is alcohol, so it'll know what to do with the air-fuel mixture. And it's mounted in there, the fuel lines are going through it. If you buy one of these at your Chevy dealer, it's $700. This thing ain't cheap. You get where I'm going? So you don't want to just say, hey babe, I think it's a fuel composition. I think we'll snag one from the Chevy dealer and pop it on there right quick and see if that's it, you know? This is where you better do the Donnie thing and make darn sure that you got something wrong with this thing. All right, so scan tool showed the fuel alcohol level was at 45%. All right, you got that? E85, if somebody's putting E85 in there, you're liable to have anything up to 85% alcohol in the fuel, right? That's what E85 is all about. Some people put that in a car that's not flex fuel, and it makes it run crappy. That's why in our Engine Performance 1 class, I show you guys how to measure and see how much alcohol is in the fuel. You remember that worksheet? All right. A call to the customer confirmed that her son that drove it never used E85, even though it was a flex fuel vehicle. Now, a flex fuel vehicle is pretty cool to have because flex fuel has got better injectors, better fuel tank, better fuel pump. It's just a better fuel system as far as the quality of it. And you can run regular gas in it all you want. All right, so scan tool showed a PO178, which pointed to the fuel composition sensor. But when we chased it, we were confused because we got a 56 hertz reading we measured with a meter on a signal wire that conflicted with the PID reading of 43 hertz. So which one we're supposed to believe? That the computer was seeing 43 hertz, we were measuring 53 hertz. Got to know how to set a meter, got to have a meter to read that. So should we believe the PCM or the actual measured value? See, there's our code we got. All right, so there's the fuel composition sensor. You can see it right there, you know, this one. All right, expensive part. Kind of spooky to toss one of those bad boys on there anyway. Preponderance of evidence pointed to the fuel composition sensor, and a new and pricey one fixed that one. We put a new one of those bad boys on there. They were good to go. Now, I tell you what really makes you sick if you throw one of those on there and you find out it's something else. Because the GM place ain't gonna take it back. You know what I'm saying? $700. You got it costs more. It costs more than an engine controller. A little bitty thing. Some of the ones on the early Fords when they were using fuel composition sensors were like $3,000 back in '99. But they started doing it a different way. A lot of them they started using oxygen sensor input to find out what to, you know, they just tuned it that way. Anyway, that's another story. All right, electrical gremlins on the F-150. Wasn't a Frontier. I'd already been there. I knew where to look for the gremlin problem. Anytime you got lots of problems on an early or you know late '90s, early 2000s F-150, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have a bad junction box. And you can take that junction box right there on the end. You can pry it open with a screwdriver. This is a bunch of laminated stuff in here that they bend tabs up off that laminate that comes out to these. That is, and all of this stuff is. I took one of these apart one time and said maybe I could fix these things. You take that apart, it's the most confusing thing you ever pulled apart in your life. And so I went ahead and said, well, I'm going to go ahead. Moisture damage. See, when you pull that open with your screwdriver, if you see that garbage right there, you know good and doggone well that junction box needs to be replaced because it's got moisture. It's been there shorting out on the copper. few $100s later, and this one here, I think the last time I bought one of these was like $125 or something, I may be wrong, I can't remember. And you see I've got 2 or 3 of them over there, we've had to replace their one. There's a follow-up on this story, this is kind of funny. The boy, this was Joey's boy, the guy, the ACR instructor, and after he drove it for a few days, he started having electrical problems again. It was okay right at the start with. I'm not talking, it may have been, I don't remember how long it was, maybe a couple of weeks. And I kept telling him, I said, you need to fix it so no water drips on this when it rains. Because the windshield seal sometimes will let it drip right down there on that thing, that's why they go bad. He never got it straightened out. And it rained, and he started acting up again. Well, that time around, he actually went to the Ford place and traded this one in for another one, and I showed him how to, I told him how to change it himself. A little aggravating, not too bad. He got it changed out, still had the problem with the alternator wasn't putting out. But the plot thickened. After he put the alternator on there, got the battery charged up, he had a flashing theft light. And you think maybe he plugged something in wrong, or maybe pinched a wire, or whatever. All right. There was no passive anti-theft problem. The PCM wouldn't talk to the scan tool. If the PCM won't talk to the scan tool, remember I was talking about theft yesterday? Anti-theft light will flash. All right. What I did was, you see that little test light, how dim it's glowing? Barely shining at all. I hooked up to one of the injector wires. This is the red wire that comes from the EEC power relay, and I got that. Well, I said, this is what's going on. The PCM ain't got enough power to even wake it up. So over in the panel under the hood, not the same one, that was under the dash. The one that's under the hood, I went over on the EEC power relay with my test light still hooked up, and I tapped it. Came on bright. Fired up. So he just needed an EEC power relay. It's then somehow this stuff goes that wrong, you know, one after another. When we connected it to the power feed at the injector, you know, and that's where we had. So the Navigator was undergoing the final stages of the change in phaser surgery. Got a call for this 2002 Nissan Maxima, been diagnosed by their husband, said it needed a starter, because sometimes it would just click rather than spinning, click, click, click. All right, so when I settled into the seat and turned the key, it spun for about 40 seconds before it fired up. Now that ain't good for the starter, and it also ain't right. He was standing right there, but I mentioned, he hadn't said anything about it, so that thing left out, see? His long crank hard start, probably at least part of the reason the starter was trying to die. Well, it wasn't a Frontier. I actually seen stuff like this before, so it probably needed a cam sensor on one bank or the other. And I told him, I said, I think you're going to need a cam sensor, one of the two, you know, because it'll be sick. All right, so the new starter in place, long crank happened again, so I stabbed this, you know, plugged in the scan tool to it, and the cam sensor on bank number 1 was going to be the next move because it was throwing me a code for that sensor. And so we had to wash away about a pound of grease and crud from around this thing before we got it out of there. And you know, they're different. They look, the one on the back bank and the one on the front bank look different, but one way or another. They put it in there, and it fired up really fast after that. So cam sensor can make it hard to start if one of them was good and the other was bad. Remember that. Navigator was done the same day, and it ran out of here really well, and they drove it for a few days. Well, 2 weeks later, it returned with a complaint that it was doing the same thing. Well, it wasn't doing the same thing. It had spark plug issues. We had no cam sensor codes. Cam trace pattern was perfect. We had an engine miss and a misfire code. Previously, we didn't have a misfire code. All right, we should have replaced the spark plug the first time around because these plugs right here, and these are the ones, and you know, people can act shocked and horrified if they want to, but you snatch those suckers out with an impact wrench, you never have a problem. If you screw them out slow, that little nose will come off and you got to use a special tool to get it out of there. Now, the one that you were changed out, Emmanuel, in that truck are different type of spark plugs, but these right here are the ones that in 3-valve and 5/4s. Now, after we replaced those, it ran like a dream. It didn't give any more trouble. So we, you know, put us in a spark plug in there. But what was funny was I told him, get these out with an impact wrench. Well, the only one that he said I couldn't get on the number 8 with an impact wrench, so I screwed it out with a, and that's the one that the nose came off of. The one he screwed out slow.
And that's probably all the way in the back.
All the way in the back on the driver's side, so he had to get that tool and go down in there and bite into that thing and pull it out. And I told him, I told you to get all, and I got that little 90-degree impact wrench, you know, that little Ingersoll Rand thing. It's so dadgum. It's expensive, but boy, is it fine whenever you need to do something quick. Anyway, If he'd have listened to me, he wouldn't have had to go in there and fight with that tool back in there in that old hard place.